better. Okay, so we're live. Got a connection. Starting in 7 minutes. Evening, Ted. I think you're the first one on. Oh, we just got a few more people popping in. Evening. Good. Families joining in. I'll try and keep it rated for general audience. Evening, Wa. Hope you're doing well. Hello. Good to see you too. Hello, Yankee Apple from Michigan. Evening, Miroslav. Okay, we're almost ready to start. Another 3 minutes. Getting our crew together here. No, we're not getting a lot of snow. There's a little wee bit of snow on the ground, and a lot of it melted today. It was quite warm today. It's been pretty dry so for well over a month. We haven't got much snow or rain. We bought a brand new Ritem snowblower this year. I'm kind of hoping for some snow to try it out, but better be careful what I wish for.
It's 6 o'clock.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So this evening we're going to deal with the formless realms, the arupa realm, and this really completes a survey of the different states of existence. In the Abhidhamma, consciousness is divided in different ways. There's 89 classifications altogether of chitta. But one of the principal divisions is into 4 by level or plane. In Pali is bhumi, level of consciousness. The kama bhumi is the sense desire realm. It's the most diversified. It includes all the beings from the hell realms up to the heaven realms and everything in between. So that's humans, animals, ghosts, hell beings, and devas. They're all sense desire realm. It's the most complex level of consciousness, the most variety, both in terms of different sorts of beings and within one individual being themselves. There's a great deal of diversity in the mind, a great deal of complexity. The next level of consciousness is the rupa bhumi, which we talked about last time. The rupa bhumi is the realm of form, and it's the level of the Brahma beings, and in terms of human consciousness, it's experienced during jhana. It's called rupa, the form level, to contrast it with the next higher level, which is arupa. A is the negative prefix in Pali, arupa, or the formless realm. And the 4th level is nibbana, which is, of course, quite separate from the other 3. The other 3 are all conditioned, although they're increasingly subtle. There's less diversity and less complexity as you ascend through the levels. So we're going to deal with that 3rd one this evening, the arupa level, and that's experienced by humans in the arupa jhanas, formless states. That is the base of boundless consciousness, or the base of boundless space, the base of boundless consciousness, nothingness in either perception or non-perception. And they also correspond to possible states of rebirth. One can be reborn as a formless being. And this is quite different from the first two levels because it's devoid of materiality. So they're also called the four khandha beings, because we have for sense desire level and for the Brahma level, we have five khandhas. We have body, consciousness, perception, mental formations, and feelings. But body doesn't exist in this level. It's pure mind only. So that means that it's very difficult for us to imagine being completely free of form. We're so used to being embodied beings. I mean, this is the natural state of most of the cosmos, is that mind is intimately associated with body. Embodied beings have a physical form. They also have mind. And it's not easy for us to conceptualize a being that's pure mind. It is worth thinking about, and I think it's a very rewarding effort to investigate and think about the formless realms, because it helps us to understand what philosophy calls the mind-body problem, seeing what is body and what is mind and how they are related. So thinking about a mind-only being is like doing a thought experiment. To understand one component, we'll abstract out another component. So there are some implications of this, beings without body. One very significant implication is that many of the assumptions we make don't apply. For example, these beings have neither extension nor location, because extension and location are properties of space, which is considered part of the rupa khandha, the materiality. The first level has some connection to that, boundless space, but the other three are completely divorced from any connection to even the empty materiality of space. So you can't say that they're here or there or anywhere. You can't say they're infinitely large or infinitely small. None of that makes any sense. Mind is not matter. Mind is not associated with a location. Location and extension are properties of matter. They don't apply to mind. So these abstract concepts, as I say, they're difficult to imagine or formulate. It's really probably impossible to visualize. And this difficulty was recognized by the ancients in the Katawatu, which is a very interesting text. It's the book of debates. It's considered to be part of the Abhidhamma. It's a relatively short text. It has a number of back and forth debates between the Theravada and other schools. It was probably written, it's also acknowledged to be the last book added to the canon, probably around the time of King Asoka, or maybe even a bit later. It's probably originated as a manual, a debate manual, because the Indian culture at the time, and even I understand even today, Indians love intellectual debates. It's kind of a sport or an amusement for them. So it was very common for the different schools of philosophy in India, including the different schools of Buddhism, to debate on various points. And this is a book of debates. And one of the debates is about the formless realm, because some of the other schools held that these realms couldn't possibly be really formless, that mind cannot exist without an association with matter. So they tried to postulate various ideas of very subtle matter or invisible matter, or one of them spoke about very tiny matter, like atomic level beings. But the Theravada position was, and this is also held by the Sarvastivada as well, held that no, these beings are without form of any sort. They're pure mind. So they have no position, no location. So when we talk about the various heavens that we've talked about before, including the Brahma realms, they can, at least in theory, be located in space. We can, and there are different texts that lay them out, and in a, how high they are and so on. But the formless realms are not. So these beings have no location. They have no senses other than mind sense. So they live entirely in their own mind. It's not stipulated anywhere that I found that they might communicate with each other. This is not ever stated one way or the other. I suppose it's possible to imagine that they have telepathic communication with one another, but this is nowhere mentioned. They never have the defilement of anger arise. Well, they do have desire as desire for existence, and they can have delusion. It's also stated that it's not possible for any being in the formless realm to attain nirvana. Although someone who's a stream winner from the human realm is reborn there, they can so there can be stream winners there if they made their attainment prior to their birth in the formless state. But once in the formless state, it's not possible, because it's impossible for them to really see the Four Noble Truths. They don't see dukkha, and they don't see release from dukkha. In a way, you could say that this is the bare minimum of sansaric existence. It's conditionality at its most subtle, its least articulated. So there's very little. It's a minimal state of existence. So there's very little to rub up against each other, so they don't experience the dukkha. They don't experience dukkha in any. Dukkha is a universal, but they don't experience it in any sense that's obvious. The feeling tone there is primarily equanimity, upekkha, but it's said to be so profound of a peacefulness that it's metaphorically called a very high bliss. So it's kind of a contradiction, but I think that the text that refers to them as having extreme happiness is using sukha very loosely. As upekkha, when it's reaches that kind of transcendent level, it's a profound peacefulness. So you could say it's better than happiness. It's happiness. And there is that phrase, sukham param sukham, the bliss beyond bliss. So there are 4 levels within the arupa realm. The first is the base of boundless space. So there's still here some tenuous connection to materiality, because, as I said, space is really only makes sense within a material realm. And we could perhaps clarify here what the ancient Indians meant by space, which might be a little bit different than the understanding of moderns. And this was actually another of the debates, was the nature of space, because the Sarvastivadins held that space was unconditioned, asankata, whereas the Theravada view was that space is conditioned, or at least I'll clarify this, at least in one aspect, and the only truly unconditioned element is nibbana. So this was actually one of the major distinctions between Theravada and Sarvastivada, whether space is conditioned or not. The Theravada clarified their position by saying that there were 3 kinds of space. Space as delimited, space as abstracted, and space as emptiness. Space as delimited means space that is formed or created, like you dig out a well, you have an empty hole in the ground, you've made space there, or you fill it in, then you lose the space. So that is obviously conditioned. It's conditioned in a very mundane, trivial sense. We make space. You build a house, you put up 4 walls, you've made a space inside the house, right? So space as delimited. And that one is the only kind of space that is actually real. The other 2 are just empty concepts. So they're neither conditioned nor unconditioned, because they have no actual reality. They're just mental concepts. Space as abstracted is a very narrow meaning. It's doing kasina meditation and then abstracting the object away to be aware of the space underlying it. So you create in your mind a red kasina, for example, a red disc, and then you can take that meditation a step further and go into the base of boundless space by expanding the red kasina to infinity and then removing it and being aware of the underlying boundless space. But that space is not real. It's just a negative conception. It's a negative kind of nimitta. The third kind of space is actually fairly close to the modern conception of space. It's a kind of a mathematical idea where you can have different objects like planets and give them locations and distances from one another. But the actual space is only an abstraction. It's not a real thing. Only the objects have that kind of ontological weight to be classed as real in that sense. And this would be the kind of space that's meant by boundless space in the contemplation, I think, and in the state of existence. So the next level is the base of boundless consciousness, which doesn't reference space at all, but it's an infinity of consciousness. So this is already difficult for us to wrap our heads around, because it's infinity of consciousness doesn't mean an extension of consciousness into infinite space. It's just consciousness itself without a location. It doesn't have a material location. It can't be pinpointed as here or there, but it's boundless. It also doesn't have limits. So I've heard this suggested. There was a monk who suggested that this level of the Rupa realm, the second level of the Rupa realm, boundless consciousness, is the same, or is the origin of the Upanishadic idea of the one universal mind. It's kind of an intriguing possibility. The third level is the base of nothingness, akinchayatana, which probably a more literal translation would be not nothingness, but no thingness. There's no thing there, so there's no referent there. So even consciousness is not apparent as a object. A consciousness still must exist for the being to be aware at all, but we're not referencing it. So this is a kind of a great emptiness, no thingness. But that's not even the end of the road. It's becomes possible for even nothingness to seem kind of busied and cluttered, because nothingness itself is a concept. And the fourth, which is the most subtle level in all of conditioned existence, there's nothing more subtle than this except nirvana. So this is samsara at its absolute minimum, is the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And this is explained, the name is kind of baffling, but it's explained as meaning that there is a subtle perception, but it's not what we would recognize as perception because it's so subtle. And one of the commentaries gives a couple of similes that are kind of charming, that they both involve a monk and a novice. And in the first one, the monk and the novice are out on alms round, and the novice spies that they're coming up to a puddle of water. So he warns the monk, "Venerable sir, there is water." And the monk says, "Oh, very good, there's water. Can you fill my water flask?" And the novice says, "Venerable sir, there is no water." No. So there is water, but there isn't. As similar with the other example, the monk he'd finished his meal, and the novice had washed the bowl and he'd oiled it. They were, I guess, a cast iron bowl, and he'd oiled it to put it away. And a layperson came in to make an offering of some kind of sweet cake, and the monk said, "Put it in my bowl." And the novice said, "Venerable sir, there is oil." And the monk said, "Oh, there's oil. Good. Then I could use some oil. Can you fill up this jar for me with the oil?" And the monk said, "Venerable sir, there is no oil." So in both cases, there's some substance that it does exist, but in such a refined form, it's not what you would think as like a quantity, a mass quantity that you can use. So there is perception, but it's very subtle. So it's neither perception nor non-perception. If it was completely non-perception, it would just be either annihilation or it would be a suspension of perception, as in the Sanya realm. Now, these various states, if one is born into them and becomes a being of that realm, the lifespans there are enormously long. They're measured in thousands of kappas. But it's also possible to attain these states through meditation. And there are different routes into this to get to approach these states. And even it's quite an advanced attainment to have a mastery of these states, but one can get a glimpse, an idea by certain meditative exercises that aren't that difficult to do. One of them is to take the meditation on loving kindness or compassion, one of the Brahma-Vihara meditations, and extend that abiding to infinity, like you're radiating loving kindness to all the beings in the universe in 10 directions of space. And then just cease to pay attention to the Brahma-Vihara. Cease paying attention to metta, but allow the perception of boundless space to remain. And then one can go on by recognizing that you now have your consciousness filling boundless space. So stop referencing space and pay attention only to the underlying consciousness. Then you're into the second abiding. Then you can remove the attention to consciousness and be aware of nothingness. Then cease to pay attention to nothingness and remain at the most subtle level, neither perception nor non-perception. Another way, very similar, is to abstract from ordinary perception by selective non-attention. So you begin with the ordinary reality of your room or your surroundings, and then after, just sort of like general awareness of the here and now, after establishing yourself in that, which they call contemplation of village meaning ordinary everyday reality, you can take it one step further by removing attention from man-made objects. So now you're only aware of nature, of the ground and the sky and the trees and the grass and whatever is around like that. And that's called contemplation of forest. Then you take it another step by removing attention from living things. So now you're only aware of the earth, the underlying earth. You cease to pay attention to vegetation and so on, and just the earth and the sea and the material base. Then you can remove your attention from earth and be aware of the underlying space. Then you're back into that that sequence. If anyone is curious to try that meditation, you can find on our website, our River website, you can find a write-up of that meditation, and I've done it as a guided meditation a few times. You can find in the recorded talks on the same website. You can hunt it down. So it is possible then to get, and I think that's the only way to really understand these states, is to try and get a glimpse of them with the mind. I don't think you can really wrap your head around it in an intellectual way and really make sense of it, particularly for nothingness and either perception or non-perception. And it seems that these states were recognized in India before the Buddha. Well, it's certain that they were, because they, in the biography of the Buddha, when he was a bodhisattva seeking his own way, he first encountered a couple of teachers that he went to study with, and one of them taught meditation up to the base of nothingness, and the other one taught meditation up to the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And the Buddha mastered these meditations, and these masters believed that these states were the highest possible attainment. There was nothing beyond this. This is the goal. This is the end. And it was the great spiritual genius of the Buddha to be able to master these very subtle states and then still come away saying, no, that's not the end of the road. There's still some trace of conditionality here. Or almost anyone else realizing those sublime states would have no reason to doubt it, that that's the supreme attainment. Nirvana, the unconditioned, is entirely beyond any form of conditionality. So when we look at these various states, from the Kama Bhumi all the way up to the Arupa Bhumi, generally when you see them laid out, if you see, you'll find in books very often diagrams and charts laying these states out, or tables, and it'll be like a vertical hierarchy, and that makes sense in one way. But I would like to propose a slightly different way of thinking of it, to think of it like concentric circles. So as long as you don't take this too literally, but just as a way of holding the mind, of thinking about these states. So if you can think of Nibbana as the center of the target, the bullseye of the target, and the three other layers are circles, concentric circles, increasingly further away. Okay? And so that the Arupa realms are just outside of Nibbana. They have taken on the least conditionality. And as we go outwards from the circle and get further away from the unconditioned, we take on more and more conditionality. When we enter the realm of form, we take on form. We take on material level. So that's a whole another level of complication to deal with. And then when we cross the next threshold, we enter the realm of sense desire. We're taking on all the complications of sense desire. That includes division into genders. It includes biological needs to eat and secrete, and all the desires and impulses and instincts that go along with this coarse materiality and with relation to the universe through the senses. So it's very much more complicated. There's very much more to deal with. The dukkha is more obvious. So that has it. It's often said that the human level is the ideal level for attainment of nibbana, because here we're not overwhelmed with suffering like the lower realms, but we're also have enough dukkha that we can see there's a problem. Yet another way to think about it is, as we go through these different realms, we're returning to a source, not in a, I want to be clear about this, not in a time-bound sense, not in a temporal sense, but in a sense of more basic, more primordial existence, in a way a more natural existence. when you do this meditation, for example, that I very briefly mentioned about abstracting away different levels of reality, the thing here to notice is you're not at any stage, you're not adding anything. You know, you're taking away and seeing what's left. Right? So when you take away the complications of sense desire that manifest in the mind as the five hindrances, the nirvana, when you take those away, the mind naturally settles into jhana. The jhana is a more natural, less encumbered state of mind. And when you take away form, relation to the body, the mind naturally goes into the formless states. Because it's a more basic, it's underlying. It's we're not adding anything anywhere along. We're just uncovering what's already there. What's more basic to our nature, to our being. When we strip away the complexities of the outer levels, you know, it's like going home. So I think that's sufficient discourse on the formless realms. And I think before leaving this cosmological theme, I think I'd like to do at least two more on cosmological or mythological history and prediction prophecy. So we'll like past and future. So that's quite interesting topic. So I think we'll do that like the past next week. So I'll leave that from my discourse, and we'll see if there's any questions come up in the chat. Somebody's suggested that a good project would be to illustrate the 31 planes of existence in 2D, 3D drawings. Yeah, that would be, but not for me. I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist anyone would be interested in looking at. I've been using spatial location for remembering information in what's called memory palace techniques. I've heard of it. It seems this may be the opposite technique to formless realms. Any comment? Yeah, I don't think it has any relation to the formless realm. It would definitely be like you're constructing. If people aren't familiar with this, it's a memory technique that's is very ancient. Actually, I think ancient Greeks invented it. If you want to memorize a lot of information, you visualize a house, it's your memory palace, and you store the data away in different boxes or cupboards, and then you find them later. I don't see, in the formless realm, you wouldn't be building houses and storage. I don't think they, it's kind of interesting speculation, but I don't think they would have much to remember anyway. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving. Well, maybe for you. We've had our Thanksgiving a month ago. But yeah, it is American Thanksgiving next week. I'd forgotten that because it's not a holiday in Canada. Canada, we have Thanksgiving in October. I suppose if there's enough Americans in the group, they probably would be courteous to move it to a different day. The Christians use these for contemplations of God, love, etc. They would explore these palaces for samadhi type experience, I believe. Oh, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. I didn't realize it had a use other than just a memory or memory trick. Can beings in the Arupa realm attain nirvana? No, it's not possible for them to make any attainment there. Although there may be some with lesser attainments there who made their attainment in some other state of existence prior to being reborn there. It's not possible for them to make any to realize nibbana while in that realm. No, consciousness doesn't cease in the sphere of nothingness. It's just not. Um, it's not the evident theme. One is simply aware of nothingness. Are beings in these realms aware of their past lives? Yeah, that's also a question I don't know an answer to. I've never seen any reference to that. Devas and Brahmas are sometimes, in many cases, aware of their immediate past life, but even that's not universal. But I've not heard of these beings being aware of past lives. We really don't have much in the literature. There really isn't much description of their internal states, and we can only speculate about what all they have is mind. So, what fills their mind? What do they think of? It's never really discussed. Does one have to know their present location in space for the contemplation of village, forest, etc.? Well, it is a kind of abstract meditation. You don't. The idea is you start with the very real, but then you go into imagination pretty quickly. Like if you're sitting inside, like I'm currently indoors, and I'm surrounded by man-made objects. So if I go on to the next, if I do that meditation and I go on to the next stage, contemplation of forest, I'm already gone beyond what I visually can see. I'm already into, imagining the surrounding forest. Since bodily formations become still in fourth jhana during formless meditation, do we still hear sounds? Is it true the heart start beating and it's as if brain dead? One who is completely immersed in the state would not have any sense contact with the outside world. And whether the heart stops beating, I don't believe that's actually the case, but I'll leave some room for doubt there. Are being separated by individual consciousness or in the absence of physical existence, is it universal? I think it's probably individual, but like I mentioned when I was talking about the base of universal consciousness, there may we don't know. It's not mentioned one way or the other. We really don't have a lot of details about these realms. We don't know if they have any contact with each other. So it may be they have communication via telepathy in some form. And then that would be almost a merging of consciousness. They would not then have such a clear separation into individuals. Or it may be that a being is totally isolated and he would have the perception with universal consciousness, he would have the perception of being one with the universe, that he is the entire universe. That would be his perception, but not really the reality. So there's a lot about these realms we have to leave as a kind of a question mark. There's a lot of it, like these are good questions, interesting things to contemplate, but we don't really know. If we can have the experience of one with everything as the Upanishadic concept, how can karma be personal? Is this a distinctive characteristic from Buddhist thought? No. Even in the Upanishads, karma is individual. And the individuals, speaking about the Upanishadic model, there's only one universal mind, but it has all these different manifestations. And unless someone is fully enlightened, they perceive themselves to be an individual being, and that being would carry through individual karma. And the Buddhist position was not so much a refutation of that as a transcendence of that. It's like the Upanishads went from many to one, and the Buddhists went from 1 to 0. Is it possible for beings to attain this level of meditation and still suffer from ignorance and greed? Yes. Not so much while they're in the meditation, but it doesn't liberate a being. Either jhana or formless jhana doesn't liberate a being in the sense of uprooting the defilements. It suppresses them. So if one does these meditations often, you wouldn't normally manifest gross greed or ignorance, but it's still present in your being. You're not free from it. And as far as ignorance goes, actually, that's still present even in those states and in the beings that exist in those states. They're still ignorant because they haven't penetrated the unconditioned. I'm reading out these questions out loud because people who watch the archived video, they've asked me to, because sometimes I answer these questions, they don't get the replay of the chat. Some monks say the Buddha teachers didn't have Samma Samadhi, therefore the formless realms are separate from Samma Samadhi. Any thoughts? No, I don't think that's actually correct. Maybe they didn't have right view. They were missing samadhi, I would say. But Samma Samadhi is defined as mastery of the jhanas. So I would say they had Samma Samadhi. Yeah, thank you. Somebody said this is a talk worth re-listening to. Yeah. Okay, so I think that looks like we've run out of questions. So I'm going to take my leave and see you again next week. Okay, we do have a couple more questions coming in. I'll just look at those quick. Some scholars do, some don't term formless meditation as jhanas 5, 6, 7. What's your thoughts? Well, it's a matter of definition. It's just kind of a semantic question. You can call they're generally called in the like in the Visuddhimagga, the formless jhanas or the arupa jhanas, and they number them jhana 5, 5, 6, 7, 8. But you can call them jhanas or not. They're still doesn't change their nature. I thought the rest of the path culminated from right view, including samadhi. Yeah, it does, but I mean, the factors are separate. Thanks, Eden, for taking a literal journey from hell realm up to perception, non-perception. Unfortunately, it's rarely mentioned by most modern monastics, even in brief, much as in detail. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's actually why. That's why years ago, I decided to write a book on it, because there's really is very little out there, and I think it's a fascinating topic. My feeling is people are hungry for stories and myths, and so we create all these kind of, our culture creates endlessly all these kind of mythological realms like Star Wars and Harry Potter. Why not look at one very ancient one that was approved by the noble ones? Okay, so I will check out now, and I'll see you next week, and maybe I'll put up a notification, but maybe I will change it, because there are a lot of Americans that tune in on this, and they'll all be sitting around stuffing their faces on turkey and giblets on Thursday night, and I hope they all have a happy Thanksgiving. And recall, Thanksgiving is a good day to rouse a state of gratitude. Okay.